Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Shania Show. As you can tell from the title and the thumbnail, this is my reaction to Tiana's Bayou Adventure, the ride, specifically the one in Disneyland. And I wanted to get my initial thoughts down before I actually went on the ride. So you will see like my in-person reaction to the ride as I go on it in this video a little bit later. But like I said, I wanted to give pre-thoughts before I went on it. And I did, mainly because I have seen some photos, clips, and pieces. I really tried to avoid major spoilers, so to say, with the ride before I go on it, because I do want my reaction in person to be as genuine to my first time as possible. And honestly, like, Princess and the Frog is one of my all-time favorite movies. I love the movie so much, and I do think there were some issues with it, such as like our first black princess being a frog for 90% of the movie. She was only human for like, let's see, how long was Tiana a human? I know someone has had to have timed it. Tiana spends approximately 17 to 19 minutes, and the movie is 1 hour and 39 minutes. So it's 17% of the total film time. And let's see, 17, I guess let's say 39. So it's about like 22, an hour and 22 minutes to an hour and 20 minutes, an hour and 20 minutes to an hour and 22 minutes spent as a frog. So there were some issues with that part of it, but at the end of the day, I think it was so poignant and a pretty big shift in Disney's approach to inclusivity and DEI, which they still need to continue doing. They still need to make strides in favor of DEI and inclusivity. But for the time that it came out, I think it was like 2009, that was a pretty decent step forward. And honestly, I was so excited when I heard about the Princess and the Frog ride. And I know myself and many other people included were saying that it would have been so cool if they had done Dr. Facilia's Are You Ready for going up before the drop, and they seriously missed out on that. They seriously missed out on doing it. And I know that according to the ride timeline, it's just after the movie, and there were some changes made in the plot line, but for that specifically, I will let Kayla at the Kayla Show on TikTok talk about
Disney took one of its most controversial rides and somehow made it even more controversial. Splash Mountain opened in the late 80s in Disneyland, California, and then in the 90s in Florida. And the ride was based on the animated Brer Rabbit sequences that are in the movie Song of the South, which is a movie that Disney basically buried because of its racist stereotypes. But the ride lasted for decades because people loved the drop, they loved getting wet, and they loved the music. But most didn't realize where the story actually came from. Imagineers had been discussing for years how to retheme Splash Mountain, but it was after the Black Lives Matter protests in 2020 where Disney decided to finally make the announcement. The ride would be completely rethemed into Tiana's Bayou Adventure, and it was going to be their first major attraction built around their first black princess. When Disney first showed us concept art and blog posts, the idea was that the ride would take place right after the movie ended. Tiana, Naveen, and Louis were getting ready to host a Mardi Gras celebration. They were missing a key ingredient: a special spice. And you, the riders, would help them go into the bayou to find it. But as they continued to develop the ride, the story kind of shifted. And the final version of the ride is not about spice at all. It's more about music. The queue still has a lot of features from the original story. You learn that Tiana now runs an employee-run co-op called Tiana's Foods. In the new story, instead of helping her find ingredients, you're helping her form a band. And the plot is about assembling different musicians so that they can perform together at the celebration. Original concept art, it looked like the top of Splash Mountain was going to have Mama Odie's treehouse, but now it's just kind of a grassy hill. The soundtrack is really great. It pulls from New Orleans traditional music like Zydeco. The finale song is still called Special Spice, even though the plot has nothing to do with spices at all all anymore. I really like the original concept of the ride, not the new one so much, but I really do wish it was just the movie turned into a ride. I think we really missed out on getting Dr. Facilier right before that drop. I think it would have been epic. Do you think this new version is better than the original Splash Mountain? Do you think it gives us the ride that Tiana deserved? I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Like I was saying a little bit ago, I honestly think that they missed out on doing Dr. Facilier's Are You Ready song, like that part of the song. Friends on the Other Side. They so missed out on doing that part of the song as the build up to the drop. And like, this is where it kind of gets like a little bit finicky for me personally, because from what I've always understood from the parks is that you are like, with the characters, you are kind of in the middle of their story. You're in the middle of the movie. So it's why Rapunzel's hair is blonde and long and you don't see her with the short brown hair. It's why the Beast is still the Beast and not a man in most cases. It's why, who was I just thinking of? I was thinking of someone. It's why Captain Hook's still around. It's why Smee's there. It's why all of these characters are still there in a certain look or in a certain way, or are just there in general. It's because they're like in the middle of the movie plotline. So when they had announced that it was after the movie, that was a little bit confusing to me. I mean, it makes sense because like they don't want to show Tiana and Naveen as frogs again on the ride, especially after like that was a complaint about the movie with how long they were frogs in the movie. So I guess like it kind of makes sense with Tiana and the ride, because like they're not going to show Tiana as a frog in the parks. They're not going to show her as a frog on the ride. So like I kind of understand why they did that, but at the same time it's like I feel like there was a little bit of wiggle room. There is a little bit of wiggle room with kind of just incorporating the song or having like nods to Dr. Facilier in the ride, and that would have been the perfect time to have a nod to Dr. Facilier. And that was like honestly one of the best villain songs in my opinion. Like there are some really good villain songs out there, like Frollo's villain song in The Hunchback of Notre Dame, Hellfire, like a lot of his songs, like especially Hellfire, but like I'm blanking on the song name, but the one where he's like talking down to Quasimodo, like you're deformed, blah blah blah. So that song Hellfire, like Frollo has some pretty sadly good villain songs, very twisted but good villain songs. And then Scar has a good villain song, but like I feel like Dr. Facilier's Friends on the Other Side was like a very good villain song, and that would have been so punchy for that part of the ride. Like they could have built it up as like, sorry, I need water. It could have been built up somehow where it's like just kind of like either like a nod to Dr. Facilier with like the colors and that part of the song saying Are You Ready. It could have been like maybe they were like approaching the graveyard, the cemetery, and they see Dr. Facilier's tombstone somehow, and then that's like the build up right before the drop, and then you get to like the happy ever after, the Spice of Life song, which I have not listened to yet. There are so many ways that they could have incorporated Dr. Facilier's song with it still being after the movie, post movie. And sidetracking a little bit, I do think it's good. I miss Splash Mountain, the ride, because the ride itself was not racist or did not have racist stereotypes. I mean, it did. But the source material, Song of the South, the source material for the ride, that was racist, and that for sure was racist and had racist stereotypes. And I think it's good that Disney acknowledged that, and that it took a step in the right direction with making it the first ride center around the first Black princess. And from there, like if you look at like the original source material for Song of the South, like some of the African myths and legends, those aren't inherently racist like the myths and legends, but the way Song of the South ended up portraying racism and slavery and Jim Crow, like that was not good. That was racist. And that's not to say that there weren't enslaved people or formerly enslaved people who weren't content, but from the wide plethora of material we have from that time, the majority of people who were enslaved were not happy during that time or even post that time, because they did not have rights and they could not vote and they could not do a lot of things that they can now do, that white people could do, that they couldn't do at the time, that they can now do. Like, Song of the South is racist, and I'm not going to get into that too much here because I'm focusing on Princess Frog and Tiana, but I think it was a step in the right direction. I will miss Song of the South, not Song of the South. I will miss Splash Mountain, the ride, because the ride did have a lot of good, happy times for me, but like at the same time, it's like, I'll be okay at the end of the day. Like, when I think about it, I'm not like overly sad or upset that they changed it, and I think it's kind of stupid. I mean, feelings are valid. Whatever feelings you have are valid, but it also has to come with the acknowledgement that Song of the South was racist and had racist stereotypes and had a very negative connotation as to what slavery and post-slavery and Reconstruction time had and Jim Crow time had. It had a very negative connotation of that, and that was not good. And having a ride in Disneyland centered around that, even though it was mostly separated from the Song of the South story, having a ride that was inspired by Song of the South, not a good look. So I think it's good that they rethemed it. I do think, ooh, my back just cracked. I do think with how Tokyo Disneyland, Tokyo Disney Sea, Shanghai Disney, and Hong Kong Disney, I do think that with how their animations, I do think that with how their animatronics are, that we could update the animatronics in the US theme parks, especially some of the ones here in Disneyland, but both US Disney theme parks, like with how their animatronics are, I definitely think that the Tiana Bayou Adventure animatronics could have been much better. I'm not gonna be mad, like I'm not mad about it because they do look beautiful. I just think some of the movements and syncing could have been a lot better. And like I'm not gonna be mad about having a Lottie animatronic. I'm so happy that Lottie's on the ride. Like, she deserves so much love. She deserves so much love and attention. Like, I'm so happy she has an animatronic on the ride. I do think the animatronics could have been a lot better and fine-tuned a little bit better. So with all of that said, let's get to my in-time, real-time reaction. Okay, so I started recording not remembering that I had recorded part of this video already, and I was like, wait a second, I need to pause to include this bit, and I was like, wait a second, didn't I already do that? So I am just, this is post-writing Tiana's Bayou Adventure. This is like a couple days later, and honestly, like, at the end of the day, I do think this was the best movie choice for the ride system. I think I may have mentioned this earlier, I was not expecting a whole lot with the animatronics. A part of me would have expected a little bit better with the animatronics, considering the access to technology and finances, money that Disney has. But again, because it's Disneyland, I was not expecting a whole lot. Like, they could so update the castle at this point. Like, I love our original castle, and I will fight anyone who says otherwise. Ours is the original castle, but at the same time, I do think that they could update that while also keeping the integrity of the castle we currently have, because it is the castle that Walt Disney worked on. But again, like I was saying, I didn't expect a whole lot with the animatronics. I do think that overall they were very decent and baseline pretty well done. But like I said, if you look at, well, I didn't say this part, but like I said, they have access to finances, and technology that they could have applied to this ride as well, and they didn't. Like, if you look at Hong Kong Disneyland or Shanghai Disneyland or Tokyo Disneyland or Tokyo Disney Sea, or even Paris Disneyland, I think a little bit as well, like, they so could have gone all out with the animatronics for this and done Tiana and her movie so much more justice. And on the one hand, to kind of give the benefit of the doubt, I understand the want to kind of reuse animatronics to kind of just not, because they were already there. I do understand and applaud like the reuse there, to not like add to like waste and what you're tossing out, because like a big company like Disney, with how many people visit the parks daily, like, you gotta do what you can to not have so much waste. But at the same time, it's like, considering the access to technology and the finances and what they have at some of their Asian parks, and it's like, you would expect a little bit more. Like, yes, it's just Disneyland, and yes, there's not a whole lot of space, but they could have done so much more with the animatronics for Tiana's Bayou Adventure. So there is a slight disappointment there, but at the end of the day, like, I'm not gonna harp too long about that, just because it's like, at the end of the day, we have a Tiana ride. Hopefully they do come around eventually and update the animatronics and update a lot of stuff with Disneyland, because the castle could be made taller, and like, it could be made the same height as the Walt Disney World one. And like, my whole thing with the castle as a little bit of a pivot is that a large reason why our castle wasn't made so tall is because of funding. Walt Disney at the time did not have enough funding to make a super tall castle that he wanted to do. He wanted to do a tall castle, but it was just funding and also taking into consideration space. So there's that. And then once other things started getting going, like with Disneyland California Adventure and then Tower of Terror, like Tower of Terror, well, now it's Guardians of the Galaxy, is taller than the castle. And I feel like that says a lot, but our castle is the one that Walt Disney worked on. Our park is the one that Walt Disney walked in. So if you go to Walt Disney World, do not come, or if you're a Walt Disney Worlder and come to Disneyland, do not come at our castle. Because Walt walked in our park. So I don't want to be petty, because that's not what Walt would have wanted, but he walked in our park. So anyway, I do think that at the end of the day, for the time being, this is the best we're gonna get for representing a BIPOC princess a little bit more in the theme parks, rather than, I mean, it's great that we get the face characters in the parks that you get to meet and interact with, but you know, it's like, Tiana's a little bit hit or miss. I was able to meet her on the first day, and I was almost crying meeting her, because she is one of my favorite. I'm crying. I'm tearing up. I'm getting emotional thinking about it, because she is one of my favorite princesses next to Merida. And honestly, like, that was very inner child healing and core memory making, you know. So it's like, doing that, and then also having the ride. So it's like, overall, I had a very good experience with riding the ride. And meeting Tiana, that was actually so freaking coincidental, because I was in Eudora Chic Boutique, which is like a store down from the Blue Bayou, and I hear someone talking. So I turn around and like, like, we all know you can't wear costumes to the parks, unless you're going to like Oogie Boogie Bash or Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party. And so I hear someone talking, and I look over, and my first thought was, oh, someone's wearing a costume. And then my brain clicked, and so I was like, oh my god, like, and then I called my sister over, and I was like, oh my god, we need to take a picture. And I was almost crying, because she is one of my favorite princesses. So that was so just merging together with being able to meet her. And like the thing is that there isn't a huge guarantee that you'll be able to meet Tiana in the park. And thankfully Disneyland does have a lot of roaming characters where they'll stop in a certain place and take pictures. That's how I met Captain Hook last year with my friends, how we met Tiana this year, how I met Dr. Facilier a couple of years ago. Well, now it's like 6 years ago. But it's like we have access to roaming characters because it is a slightly smaller park. So, or very much a smaller park. So it's like we have a little bit easier access to roaming characters because it is easier for them to get to the access tunnels from most locations on the park without having to go through a different land. But I do think that this is a step forward with DEI and inclusion, and will be very good for young girls and boys being able to have something that represents them, their community, in the park outside of just face characters. We need the face characters there still, but having something a little bit extra, because if you look at a lot of the rides, take Small World out of the equation. Also, Walt Disney World, our Small World is way better. Anyway, that's the last thing I'll say. If you look at some of the rides, like Fantasyland rides, Mr. Toad's Wild Ride is animals, but that is British, so you can kind of assume they're probably white for the time period. Even their animal characters would probably be white-based, white-coated. And then you have Snow White, white. And then you have Peter Pan, white British. You have Pinocchio, white. You have... what is that for Fantasyland? I think, is that it? I think that's about it for Fantasyland. Oh yeah, Alice in Wonderland, white. And then if you go through some of the other rides, like the Tiki Room, Polynesian, but you don't really have any face characters. And even our main birds, like 3 of them are European. So Jose, Mexican, Michael, Irish, Michael, Pierre, French, and then Fritz, German. So it's like you do have the Polynesian gods represented, but you don't really have the main 4 birds really being represented by anyone who's known Polynesian. And I've tried looking up the voice cast, and it's kind of hard to find who it is. So if you know, or you know a link to something that talks about the casting for the Tiki Room, comment down below. And then you have Indiana Jones, white. And then you have Pirates of the Caribbean, I think all of that is also white. There might, I can't recall anyone who's of color on the Pirates of the Caribbean ride for the animatronics. And then you have Haunted Mansion, majority of that is white. Although, what I will say, kudos to the Muppets, with the Muppet Haunted Mansion having Constance Hatchaway be a black woman. Kudos to them. But Haunted Mansion white. Galaxy's Edge has been a little bit better, at least with Star Wars, with some DEI representation. But you don't see a whole lot of that in Galaxy's Edge. And then coming back down to Tomorrowland, you don't really see a whole lot of BIPOC representation there. And then you have the Fantasyland, which I covered. Frontierland, you don't have a lot of BIPOC representation. So it's it's a good step forward for representation, and we really need to keep going forward with that. And like I also said, it's I think I may have talked about this earlier in my pre-reaction. It's one, I did talk about this. One, they so missed out on the Are You Ready part of Dr. Facilier's song, Friends on the Other Side. They so missed out on doing that for the drop, for the big drop. And it's I know, I think I sort of talked about this in my pre-reaction. And it's my understanding was that for Disneyland Park, when you're meeting a character, you're meeting them like as if they were in the middle of their movie. So it's why Dr. Facilier it's why you can see Dr. Facilier. It's why you can see Captain Hook. It's why you can see Hades. It's why you can see a lot of these villains, especially the ones who quote unquote canonically died in their movie, like Mother Gothel. So it's like, it's why you can see a lot of them who have died on screen or off screen. It's because like they're in the middle of their movie still, so you haven't gotten to the end where they get axed. So, but like I've had friends who said that they understood that it was like after their movie, but then it's like, or they thought that it was that when you're at the park it's like just after the movie. But then how would you explain the villains? Like Darth Vader. Like Darth Vader dies, I think. And you can still see him at the parks. Even like when it's not Halloween season. Like the Evil Queen dies. But you can still see her at the parks even though they're shortening her hours. And they're making her seasonal. So it's like, it's, from what I've heard explained, it's, you're in the middle of their movie. Which is why you can see a lot of these villains. Also think of like Maleficent too. It's like you can see them at the parks. So it's like, by that logic, it wouldn't be too far off to include that part of a song, even though you're doing a new story for the ride, which I'm fine with. But it's like, even if you're doing a new story for the ride, it's like that would have been fine to do like as a little callback to like Dr. Facilier is still around. You might still see him have his like, are you ready, going up for the drop. So I do think that they missed out on that. I don't think that they needed to do a new storyline for the ride. I know a lot of people were a little bit confused by the story. I wasn't as much. I do think that it was a little bit all over the place. But like, I wasn't confused by it. It was, like I said, it was a little bit all over the place. But I don't think it was super confusing at the end of the day. And honestly, like I don't think they needed to do a whole story or a whole new story for the ride. I think they just could have stuck with it and then have the drop be the are you ready, and then you drop, and then you get led into like the big Mardi Gras parade after, or the Mardi Gras party afterwards. So I don't think they needed a whole new story. I don't think it's a detriment that they did, but at the end of the day, like I said a little bit earlier, I'm not complaining. I'm super happy that Tiana got her ride because she deserves it. And I was crying a little bit on the ride. I'm pretty sure the cast members saw me like wiping my eyes because I was crying. I wasn't crying hard or anything, but I was crying. And at the end of the day, I do think it's good. Hopefully they update their animatronics because, again, like I said, if you look at the Asian parks, so Hong Kong, Shanghai, Tokyo, like if you look at those parks, like Disney could do so much better with the animatronics. And like, it is what it is right now though. So I'm really happy that I was able to go on the ride. It'll probably be sometime, but that for me has been like, I already knew it was going to be a must ride for me. It's kind of like on the same level as the Tiki Room for me, where it's like, for me, the way I explain the Tiki Room is, if I don't go on the Tiki Room and have a Dole Whip, that I even go to Disneyland. And like, if I go multiple days, I have to go both days. However many days I go, like I have to go to the Tiki Room each day I go, or else did I even do Disney? And then Tiana's Bayou Adventure has become that for me now. So it's like, I don't care what the weather is. I'll try to go earlier in the day so that I'm not freezing at night. But yeah, that has become a must ride for me, and I'm really happy I was able to go on it. So again, thank you to Kayla for letting me use her video so that she could explain a little bit better in her perspective. Thank you to her for letting me use that video in my video here. And that is the end of this video. If you've been on Tiana's Bayou Adventure, let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. that is the end of this video. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video.